Good day to you all. This is grade A tutor. I'm in the person of Ajimai Derek. Today we are going to treat about the introduction to psychology. So, psychology is an interesting topic or a course that will give you an overview of how you know that people think, and also you know how others behave the way they behave. So it's like psychology is somehow similar to sociology. You get it? But as you see, with sociology, it deals with the society. You get why do people behave the things they do? Because of the particular society they find themselves with. From our psychology, we are trying to use scientific method, scientific process to know how or why people behave the way they are behaving. So when you talk about the scientific method, we are talking of the process, the structural process that we go through to study behaviors. I hope you are getting the point. So let's move on to discussing. So psychology symbol is the Greek letter of psi, which represent the mind or soul, and is the basis for the word psychology. So the symbol that you are seeing here is the Greek letter that we call it a psi. So the symbol is derived from the Greek word psi, which means mind also, as we have talked about earlier. So let's come to the definition of psychology. So when we look at this, you can see that psychology is the scientific study of human and animal behavior and mental processes. So if you want to capture the concept of this one, scientific study, so you are trying to study how humans and animals behave. But how do you do it? You use scientific study, you use processes and methods. You go through those methods in order to study those behaviors. I hope you are getting the point. And then it encompasses the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how people think, act, and feel. So, how people used to think, act, and feel, that stuff comes from some biological influences, some social pressures, maybe the society of our friends, or maybe our friends, or maybe any family find ourselves into. They influence or they affect how we think, how we act, and how we feel. So, this is a concept of understanding what psychology is, the scientific study of human behavior. And then when you talk of overt behavior, refers to the action that are directly observable and measurable by others. So when you talk of overt behavior, so they are the behaviors that you can actually see. So if you see someone walking, it's a behavior. If you see someone talking, it's a behavior. We call all these things that you can see, we call all these things as what overt behavior. But those that are not directly observable by others, that is internal factors, they are the covert what behavior. And it refers to the internal private mental process or physiological responses that are not directly observable by others. So sometimes how your emotions are, your anger, there are something you won't see, but it is something internal. Hope you are getting the point. Yes. And then we move on to the goals of psychology. What do psychologists intend to achieve? What is our goal? First, describe. We want to observe and document behavior and mental processing. So the reason why, or the goals of psychology, is we have to know how people behave. You observe, we document how they behave so that we may be able to describe that this and this and this is how this kind of people they do think, feel, or act. Are we getting it? Great. And then to explain, to understand the causes of these behaviors and mental processes. So one of the goals is to explain, to make sure that you understand why the person is behaving this way. What is causing this behavior? Are we together? Great. And then to be able to predict, that is to forecast future behaviors or thoughts, and also control and influence, to apply physiological knowledge to solve practical problems and improve lives. So this is what psychologists intend towards achieve. And we have the historical roots, the philosophy, that's the ancient Greek philosophers, that's Plato and Aristotle. They pondered on the mind and body relationship. Sometimes how your body reacts depends on how your mind or where your mind is thinking up to. Are we getting the point? And we have the physiology, that is early physiology studied the brain and the nervous system. And you have the William Wundt. He was the first psychology. He was the first person who established the first psychology laboratory in Leipzig, that is Germany, marking the formal beginning of psychology as a science. So the person who began or who brought up a laboratory for us to mark out the study of psychology as a science was William Wundt. That's 1879. Are we together? Great. And one of the major perspectives and school of thoughts that we are going to talk about is structural. So when you are talking of the structuralism, that's Wundt and Tichner. Is it Tichner? Yes. So the one of the school of thought is, according to the structural aspect of the school of thought, it focuses on breaking down mental processes into their most basic component using introspection. That is looking inward, looking inwardly to describe your thoughts and feelings. So in case you go up to a counselor and the counselor start asking you questions, breaking things down, like, okay, do you feel this? Do you mostly feel headache? Do you mostly feel sad? Just like they are trying to understand your behavior through a method called the introspection. That is, you look inward to describe the thought and your feelings. So in case you approach a counselor and then the counselor was like, okay, how do you feel about this? What happens when you do this? So all these things is a breaking down. That's why they break down into mental processes so that they will be able to understand how you feel using the method of introspection. Hope you're getting the point. Great. And then when you talk of the functionalism that is William James, it emphasized the purpose or function of consciousness and behavior. What all these things means that what the mind does and how behavior helps us survive and adapt. That's all about the functionalism according to William James. So it's like how you see at times when you put your hands in a fire, automatically your mind just tells you that no, it's painful or it's hurting you. You have to just take your hands off. Are we together? Yes. So this functionalism, all these that they are trying to talk about is what the mind does and how behavior helps us to survive and adapt. Are we together? Great. And we talk about the psychoanalysis by Sigmund Freud. So he stressed on the influence of unconscious drive. You see, at times there are some unconscious motives or conscious behaviors that we are not aware of. But these unconscious motives and behaviors shapes us or helps us to adapt or behave in a certain way. So in case you have started, maybe you started a little, you started when you were, let's say, in your early stage, your childhood, there will be some things that you did in your childhood that has developed fear in you, but it's in your unconscious motives. You get it? And these unconscious motives, although you don't remember, but anytime anything of that sort comes close to you, you feel that fear. So there are some unconscious motives that shapes us, or that makes us to behave in a certain way we behave, or act or feel in a certain way we always feel. Are we together? Great. So looking at this, we have understood the concept of psychoanalysis, and then moving on to behaviorism, that is according to Watson and Pavlov and Skinner. So according to behaviorism, it's like our actions and behaviors is determined by what we see. Are we together? So it says it's focused solely on observable behavior and how it is learned through condition. So the reason why a baby will behave like the baby is fighting or a child is fighting, it depends on what that kid has seen through an observable behavior, like he has learned that behavior. So behaviorism talks of the behavior that we mostly exhibit. It is learned or it is experienced. So behavior is learned through experiences and environment. That is when we came about the classical and the operant condition, of which we are going to talk about. Are we together? Good. So, and then we move on to the Gestalt psychology. And according to the Gestalt psychology, one thing that you have to understand it's like um the Gestalt psychology helps us to, so all about this Gestalt psychology is emphasize that the whole of experience is greater than the sum of its parts. So it focus on perception and problem solving. So in case you go somewhere and you are seeing a dot, like there are some dot that are form a circle. Instantly, you don't see a dot, you see what? A circle. But it shapes how you perceive things. So if you see a dotted outline of a circle, your brain still sees a full circle, not just a random dot. So in case maybe someone has used just a dotted outline to draw maybe a toy, automatically the moment you see that particular thing, you see the whole picture, but you don't intend to focus on this dotted outline that we are talking about. So what about the Gestalt psychology? The key idea about this Gestalt psychology is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That is all about the Gestalt psychology, according to the school of thought. And then we have the humanistic psychology. The humanistic psychology emphasizes that it focuses on the positive side of human nature. So I'm actually explaining all these things in order for you to get the understanding well. And then with this, you can see that this psychology focus on the positive side of human nature. It believes that everyone has the power to grow, make choices, read, and also reach their best potential. So you have your own power to do. That's something we call the self-actualization. That's all about the humanistic psychology. So it focuses on free will, self-love, growth, and reaching your full potential. That is why he said that it emphasizes on the human potential, free will, self-actualization, and the importance of personal growth. That's a humanistic psychology. And then with the cognitive psychology, it focuses on a mental process such as perception. So the meaning of this human and the cognitive psychology is about how we think, how we understand, remember and solve problems, and also use languages. Hope you're getting the point. So let's say when you study for a test, you must understand the topic, you have to remember the details and apply it in exam. We call this process. So that perception, memory, and the problem solving are all part of cognitive psychology. So the key idea about this cognitive psychology is the mental processes shapes our behavior. Are we together? Good. And then we talk about the biological or the neuroscience perspective. So with the neuroscience perspective, it's like this perspective looks at how our brain and nervous systems and hormone genes affect how we think. Are we together? Yes. So these things affect how we think, maybe how our brains and also how our genetics and system affects how we behave, or maybe how some people do the things they do. So maybe you have something like an maybe any example like, okay, so let us use this example. So if someone feels sad all the time, there's a biological psychologist that maybe that's how the person is. You get it? And then their brain chemicals also, or maybe some family history that, oh, these people, they are always sad, always depression runs through their genes or something like that. So these biological perspective shifts us, or like help us to know how some people do the things they do, or maybe how some people act, think, and also feel. Are we together? And then we have the evolutionary psychology. This one, it talks of, it means this view says there are some psychological traits as adaptation that evolved through natural selection to solve ancestral problems. So maybe this view says our behaviors and thoughts is developed over time to help our ancestors survive and reproduce. So let's cite this example. We might be naturally afraid of snakes, you get it, but we being afraid of snakes has really helped us to avoid danger. So that anytime you see a snake, it's either you run or maybe the snake also runs from you. So you get it. So the key idea of this evolutionary psychology is our minds and behaviors have evolved for survival, because how our ancestors, our old people made us understood some things. It would be like if you are in a bathroom and then you blow a whistle, your mom is going to die. Initially, it's not like your mom is going to die, but they needed to do that to prevent the chemicals that you are using it to bath to enter into your system. So these behaviors has actually shaped us of how we perceive things, how we think, and how we act. That's called the evolutionary what? Psychology. And then we move on to the social cultural perspective. So with the social cultural perspective, this perspective looks at how our culture, society, and family and friends also shape how we think and act. At times, your culture, as I said, sociology is how, why do people behave or why do people do the things they do, because they find themselves in a particular society at a particular time. So there are some social cultural factors that affect how humans behave and also their mental processes. Are we together? Good. So we look at the research methods in psychology. When we are trying to study how people think and feel in a setting, we have some methods that we follow. We have the descriptive methods, and then with the descriptive methods, we have the observation. Observation can be either naturalistic or laboratory. When you talk about the natural aspect of observation, you are trying to study a particular being, or maybe you are trying to study someone in its natural setting. So you want to study how these students behave. You enter into the natural setting, how they used to do their normal things, and then you study them, you observe them. But we're talking of the laboratory, whereby what you want to experiment on has been brought to a certain environment, separated from its natural environment to be studied. Are we getting the point? Yeah, so we have the case studies, you have the surveys, and we have the correlational studies. The correlational studies we are having, so we are having like you are trying to examine the relationship between two things, or maybe two or more variables. So correlation does not imply causation. Causation helps you to understand what causes how two variables affect each other. But with correlation, you want to know how closely these things are. So that is why we are saying that correlation does not imply causation. You get, causation means the causes, but correlation is how related, how closely two variables are related. Are we getting the point? Yes. And you have the experimental methods. That is to manipulate an independent variable to observe its effect on a dependent variable. So you have the experimental method, as I was saying, that will bring it to an environment whereby you have to study this particular thing, how it should behave on maybe a dependent variable to know the causing and effect of it. And also you have the ethical considerations in research. That's informed consent, debriefing, protection from harm, and confidentiality. When you're trying to do research, there are some there are some ethical things you must consider. Informed consent, you must make sure that the person that you're trying to experiment on is aware of what you are doing. Are you getting the point? And also debriefing, protection from harm. Maybe the person you're trying to experiment on must be protected from harm. And also information that you're going to get from the person must be kept well as a secret. That's the confidentiality. Are we good? Great. And then we move on to the video psychology. The video psychology and its types. So with the pseudopsychology and its types, it refers to the system or theories that claim to be scientific psychology but lack empirical evidence, and also scientific methodology and also falsifiability. Yeah, so with this one, it's like it means there are some fake or false psychology. There are some belief systems that sound like real psychology, but they are not based on scientific research or maybe an evidence. So they often use personal stories for that, and then instead of fact they are using personal stories. They make vague arguments or maybe some general statements. So the video psychology talks of the fake or maybe the false psychology aspect. There are some things we are actually believing in psychology, but it lacks evidence. It lacks some evidence to prove what you're actually talking about. And then with this, we move on to understanding astrology. So with astrology, it claims that your personality or your future is based on your birth date or star sign. So with the astrology, as I was talking about, in explanation to all these that has been given to you here, for you to get a better understanding, all that this means is it's like talking of astrology. It means that it's one of the types of the pseudo psychology that we are talking about right now. And then with this, you can see that with astrology, it means that someone claims that your personality or your future is based on your birth date and star sign. You see, at times you'll be there and someone will be like, "What is your star sign?" "Oh, this is how my star looks like," and then they will use that to depend like, "Okay, this is how your future is going to look like." These things is actually something that lacks scientific evidence. So how are you going to use that as a psychology? Because with psychology, we are trying to make sure that we use scientific method to understand or to know how humans do their way or maybe feel and act. Are we together? So astrology is part of what the ties of the pseudo psychology. So an example is like you are Leo, so you are naturally brave. Having don't you get it? Because some will be like, okay, there are some people with these names. If you are called maybe um Daniel is brave because of they have some there are some stories that they used to be with Daniel in the Bible entered the lions den, and then by God's grace he was saved. So Daniel shows God with us. So it's like they are trying to use stories instead of scientific evidence or instead of scientific method. Are we together? So they term this as what? Astrology. Astrology rather, sorry. So that is all about what we are discussing here. So why is it video psychology? Because it lacks empirical evidence. You get it? That is, there are no like scientific studies have failed to find any correlation. Like there's no correlation between what you are talking about, and it's lacks like is false because astrological claims are often vague in general, that they can be interpreted to fit almost any outcome, making them unfalsifiable. Are we together? Great. So this is all about the astrology. I've explained much, so let's move on to the other. So moving on, we are going to talk about the phrenology. So with this phrenology, in the 19th century, according to pseudoscience, that claim to determine a person's character, personality traits, and also mental aptitudes by measuring palms and indentation on the scar. So with this, to cut everything short, to make it very simple, with this phrenology, they believe that the palms on your scar could reveal personality traits. When you talk of pump, it's like maybe a small raised area on your body or maybe any part of your skin. You get it? And then they use this to show that okay, this could reveal a personality trait. Are we together? So maybe for example, the palm means you are creative. Maybe you having a small raised area on your body or on your skin means that you are creative. No, there's no correlation in this. Are we together? So that is why when we say this is called video psychology, it lacks scientific basis. What is the scientific method that you use to claim what you're actually talking about? Are we together? Great. And then move on to understanding graphology. So so according to the graphology, to it talks of maybe there are some people they can judge your personality by your handwriting. Be like this person how he or she writes, maybe how he or she is doing his own things by his handwriting or her handwriting, you can see that the person will be great in life, but it doesn't tally anywhere because it lacks scientific studies. It lacks scientific method to describe what you are talking about. Because how can you tell me the handwriting of this particular person, or maybe the slanted handwriting of this particular person, means that the person is brilliant? And at times they have a saying that most brilliant students and also intelligent students, their handwriting are not nice. How is this something that you can term it as psychology? It becomes psychology when it is based, or you use scientific studies to describe human behavior, but you can't use your own personal experience to describe a human. Okay, because of how it went for, maybe how it went for this particular person, that's how this person moved. Psychology is always scientific what studies. You have to use methods and process to explain why humans behave the way they are doing, or maybe acting and also feel. So example of this guy, graphology, maybe slanted handwriting means that the person is emotional. Come on, you can't tell me this. Are we together? Great. And then we move on to this to discuss the sun mystery. With the sun mystery, we call about the palm reading. I remember there was a time that a friend of mine, that's usually there are some people, I'll actually say they have their eyes are really open. There was a time the person will look, the person will look into my palm, will be like, you will travel to only three places by counting the number of lines in a particular place. These things is not scientific studies. You can't tell me this. So at times we mostly believe them because you actually think that, oh, it actually counts, but it is not psychology, it is pseudopsychology, because it's something interesting but lacks evidence. It has no scientific basis. Are we together? Yes. And then with this, for example, about this some issue, maybe there are some people, they read a number of lines in your palm and be like, oh, this person will be rich. So meaning that those that we are having less lines in our palms are going to be poor. Nah, it lacks scientific what studies. It lacks scientific basis for you to tell me that by the readings of my palm, I'm going to marry a good wife, or maybe you are going to marry a good husband, or something like that. We call this psychology. Are we together? Great. And then we move on to discuss the numerology. That is, you see, at times there's a belief in a divine and mystical relationship between a number and some coinciding events. You get it? So for example, there are some people, they'll be like, if you have a number of, maybe if your date of birth is 7th of this July, like they base on numbers to actually predict your future, or maybe they make meanings to numbers. You get it? So it'll be like, okay, looking at a person's birth date, this person is actually going to be rich. It's like it's coincidence. It's just coinciding with some event. You are just using numbers to coincide with some events. Are we together? Great. So all these things, they lack scientific studies, they lack scientific method, they just lack the scientific method that they have to use. That is why it is psychology. Are we together? Yes. And then we move on to understanding the key characteristics of psychology. Something you have to take note. What makes it something that we call the psychology? One thing that we talk about, the reliance on anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence. So yeah, maybe I made a mistake in the pronunciation. So they have a saying that it worked for me, or I know someone who. Nah, all these things are based on stories. They lack scientific method, they lack scientific basis. You get it? So we have the lack of falsifiability, we have the absence of peer review, use of scientific sounding jargon, confirmation biases, over reliance on authority because the guru said so. You have to do it because the guru is saying that this medicine will work for me and will work for these people. It has to work for everyone. No, that's not how it should be. So these are some of the characteristics of pseudopsychology. Are we together? Great. So you have to take note of this so that you'll be able to have the understanding of all that you have been dealing in class. So you have the early experiment in psychology. So in the early days of psychology were marked by groundbreaking experiment that sought to establish it as a scientific discipline moving away from purely philosophical inquiry. Philosophical inquiry. This experiment laid the foundation for many of the subfields we see today. You get it? So during or before, or maybe when psychology came, there are some experiments that we made to for us to have a discipline, a scientific discipline, for us to explain behaviors and also understand behaviors, and also how humans and animals feel, think, and act. Are we together? So the first psychology laboratory and also introspection was brought by William Wundt. So he was the first person who came up with a psychology laboratory and also introspection, using the method of introspection rather, sorry. So his theory, that was structuralism, won't aim to break down mental processes into their most basic components. So as I was talking about, in case you go up to a counselor, the counselor starts asking you questions bit by bit in various parts so that the person can understand your behavior through introspection, looking inwardly. Are we together? So according to William Wundt, he used that like the method of what, or the approach of structuralism, and then it was based on introspection, because you look inward into yourself to describe or to for the person to know why you are behaving this way. Are we together? Good. And then we move on to, so these were the key experiment, the method, and also the introspection that he went to. He set up, so Wundt established the first formal psychology laboratory in Leipzig, that's Germany, and he trained participants, often his students, in a highly controlled method of introspection. And then he used a procedure as participants were exposed to a carefully controlled stimuli. You get it? Yes. And also, for example, the example that we said, participants might be asked to describe their sensation when a metronome clicked. So this method of introspection is you are looking inwardly, how you behave inwardly when these things happen to you. So that's all about William Wundt. That is the method or the approach of structuralism, meaning using introspection to know how humans behave, feel, and also what, think. Are we together? Great. And then we move on to Hermann Ebbinghaus. I stand to be corrected. I don't know if I pronounce it very well. So let's just take it at Hermann. Yeah. So he talked of the memory and the forgetting curve. That's his approach, was pioneering the experimental study of what, memory. He pioneered in studying the memory, how our memory used to take in information, make sure that it stores up to a certain limit, or maybe a certain time, and then afterwards, if you are going to forget it, you forget it. So that's what Hermann brought about. That was a set up aim to study the memory in its purest form, free from prior associations. You get it? So why all these things is just important for you to know the early experiment that happened in the that for Hermann, it happened in the late 18th. Yeah. So that is it. And then we move on to Ivan Pavlov, that the early 19th, he came about the classical condition. There's a very interesting thing that we are going to talk about. That is a form of associative learning. How something that doesn't elicit a response will actually elicit a response when it is being associated with something that already elicits a response. Are we together? That's all about classical condition. It was brought back by Ivan Pavlov in the early 19th. Are we together? So one thing that you have to understand with this psychology, it helps you to, in a business or in a corporate society, in a corporate company, finance, as a business student, having an idea of psychology helps you to know how you are going to predict behaviors, so that you know how to really relate well with your people. Talking of emotional intelligence. Are we together? Great. So we are going to go deep into this classical condition by Ivan Pavlov, and then we have the John B. Watson in the early 19s. he brought about behaviorism, that is emotional condition. You only observe something and then you find yourself that you are behaving what you observed. So in case you are having some case in your various homes, and then it happens to be for you to watch a movie, an action movie. After, or maybe the ending of this movie, after the movie ends, you get to see them put out some actions according to what, maybe according to what they observe from the movie. Maybe Superman is doing it, so they have to fly. Okay, so we call this that this behaviorism or emotional condition. It's like Watson believed that psychology should only study observable behavior and how it is learned through environmental interaction, rejecting the study of internal mental states. That's according to John B. Watson. So that is his experiment, the setup, the procedure, the example, the findings, and also what, the contribution. We are going to talk about them as we move on. So these early experiments, despite their limitation or ethical concern by today's standards, were pivotal in establishing psychology as a scientific discipline and shaping its future direction. So in as much that these experiments that we have talked about, Herman experiment, talking of John B. Watson and also Ivan Pavlov and also other experiments, in as much that they have their own limitation, they had helped us to make sure that psychology is being established as a what? Scientific discipline, and it has helped us in shaping our future direction. So they moved the study of the mind from philosophical speculation to empirical investigation. Are we together? Great. So, moving on to discussing classical condition. So, with a classical condition, to make things simple before we move on. So, let's say you are a student. The moment we ring a bell, why do you become happy when maybe your school bell is being like, maybe you have break time and then the bell just go break time please? Why do you feel happy? The bell initially shouldn't have elicited any response, but because it was attached to like unconditioned stimulus, like maybe something that will can elicit response without any attachment. So let's say you are hungry. So let me make this example. You are hungry, and anytime that you hear the bell being rang that go for break time or maybe go for breakfast, it's because that you are hungry. That's why you're happy. If it happens to be that after, maybe if the bell maybe it's like change lesson, you wouldn't have maybe attach anything, maybe any feelings or maybe any actions to it, because you know that initially when it's changed lesson, it's either your mood will change because you are going to continue with the next lesson. But the moment it becomes break time, you feel happy because there is an unconditioned stimulus that you are hungry. So anytime that the bell is being rang, you go out to eat or maybe you go out to play. So all about this classical condition is something that couldn't elicit a response can now elicit a response because it is being attached to something. So if for a dog to salivate, what do we mean by salivate? Anytime you see something that you like, maybe something like maybe you are hungry for food, and anytime food passes by you when you are hungry, you start salivating or you start feeling hungry. That is, the food has elicited a response. So the food is something we call the unconditioned stimulus. Are we together? And the response that you responded with by salivating, we call it unconditioned response. But anytime that you hear the bell being rang and it comes with the food, you see the bell initially when it's maybe when the bell is being rang initially, you don't salivate. But the moment the bell is being rang for you to go and eat, you start salivating because the bell is being paired with the food. So the bell is actually a neutral stimulus, which is it couldn't elicit any response. But the moment it was paired with the food The moment you ring the bell, the food comes. The moment you ring the bell, the food comes. There will be a time that I will ring the bell without any food and you start salivating. So with a classical condition, it means that something that couldn't elicit a response will gain the capacity to elicit a response because it has been attached to something that already have the capacity to elicit a response. Are we together? So with this classical condition, it's a type of learning in which an organism learns to associate two stimuli such that one stimulus, that's a neutral stimulus, comes to elicit a response that was originally elicited by another stimulus. That makes it that's an unconditioned stimulus. It involves the involuntary and also automatic responses. So I've explained everything for you initially, then we move on to understanding some key concepts. So one of the key components of this classical condition, you have to understand what an unconditioned stimulus is. So with an unconditioned stimulus, for example, something that already have the capacity to elicit a response. So maybe food. The moment you are hungry and then food is being presented to you, all of a sudden you start salivating. So the food that is being presented to you is called something the unconditioned stimulus. Are we together? And then with the unconditioned responses, when the food was being presented to you, you start salivating, you start responding to the food by salivating, or maybe you start producing saliva in your mouth. And then that saliva that you are producing, we call that action or that response unconditioned response. So if an unconditioned stimulus elicits a response, we call it unconditioned response. So these responses, they are not learned. You don't learn how to salivate. Automatically and naturally it comes. The moment something that you like comes. Are we together? Good. And you have the neutral stimulus. So with the neutral stimulus, it means that that stimulus has no capacity to elicit any response. You get it? It has no capacity to elicit like a tone, maybe a light. It has no capacity to elicit a response like salivating. You get it? But it becomes conditioned stimulus the moment a neutral stimulus has been paired with an unconditioned stimulus after a period of time. And then afterward, it starts to trigger a conditioned response. That is why initially I gave you an example. So maybe let's take for this example, you have a dog in the house, you have a dog in the house, and also you have a bell. Anytime you present food to the dog, the moment the dog sees you coming, the dog knows that okay, this my owner is bringing me food. The dog starts salivating. Hope you're getting it. So in as manner, even though you have not given the food to the dog, the dog has seen the food. You are having the food in your hands. You get it? So the moment the dog sees it, the dog will be hovering around you, happy to eat, and then you see that the dog will start celebrating and be like, yes, you know that action. But anytime you ring a bell in the house and it comes with the food, there will be a time that the slightest maybe sound of a bell, the dog will start to respond to it, because the dog always knows that the moment the bell is being ringed, or maybe the bell is being rang in the house, it means that food is coming. So that bell initially was a neutral stimulus, but because it was paired with food for some time to the dog, there will be a time that without the food, the moment you ring the bell, the dog will come. And then the dog knows that since the bell has been rang, or maybe yes, you have made that sound away in that house, it will come and it will be like, okay, I think my owner is bringing me what food. Are we together? Yes. So the unconditioned stimulus is being paired with the neutral stimulus to become conditioned. You get it? Yes. So after the bell has gained the capacity to elicit a response, we call it the conditioned what stimulus. And then afterwards, the response that it will elicit, we call that conditioned what response. Are we together? Great. And then we move on to discussing the process of classical conditioning as we were talking about. So the process of classical conditioning, you have before conditioning, we have during conditioning, and you have after conditioning. So before conditioning, your unconditioned stimulus will elicit unconditioned response. So maybe example, food, The moment you see food, when you are hungry, you start salivating. But the neutral stimulus will elicit no response because bell doesn't satisfy you. So the moment a bell is being rung, you don't have anything to do about it. You don't respond to it. But anytime that neutral stimulus, which is the bell, is being paired with the unconditioned stimulus for some time, it will start to elicit an unconditioned response. So this pairing is repeated multiple times. So after conditioning, the parent of the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus become conditioned stimulus, and it will start to elicit what? Conditioned response. So the bell initially was a neutral stimulus, but because it was paired with an unconditioned stimulus, it was able to elicit what? A response. Are we together? So that conditioned stimulus, that is the bell, has gained the capacity to elicit a response. That is the conditioned response by salivation or salivating. Are we together? This thing is actually an interesting thing for you to gain understanding. So we have this key phenomenon. We have the key phenomenon in classical condition. You have the acquisition, the initial stage of learning where the association between the neutral stimulus and the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus is formed, and the conditioned stimulus begins to elicit the conditioned response. So the acquisition means that the neutral stimulus that wasn't having the capacity to elicit a response has gained or has been paired with an unconditioned stimulus, and afterwards that neutral stimulus is now a conditioned stimulus because it has gained the capacity to elicit a conditioned what? Response. Are we together? And you have the extinction, that is the gradual weakening and the eventual disappearance of the conditioned response when the conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus. So let's say always you were presenting to the dog a bell and a food. There will be a time that you start ringing the bell will come, but it won't get the dog won't always be responding to that because you haven't been always presenting the unconditioned stimulus to attached to it. You get it? So for the first time it will come, for the second time, third time, fourth time, as it continues, it weakens. We call that extension. It weakens. Are we together? Good. So that is all about the extension, whereby you always present the conditioned stimulus without the unconditioned. You always present the the uh the neutral stimulus that it now became a conditioned stimulus. You always present it without the unconditioned stimulus. So there will be a time that it will weaken. You get it? And then it will just disappear. But talking of the spontaneous recovery, the rare appearance of a weakened response, a weakened conditioned response after a pause or following extension. So let's say because the conditioned stimulus was weakened, you stopped for about a month, and then all of a sudden, maybe or mistakenly, the bell was rung in the house. The dog will come because it has been a long time since the dog heard that sound of a bell. So we call that spontaneous recovery. There's a rare appearance of the weakened conditioned response after a pause. So this suggests that learning is not completely erased but suppressed. You get it? Yes. So they have used these early experiments to actually have a scientific discipline. Are we together? Good. And then you have some of the stimulus generalization. That is the tendency for a stimuli or a stimuli to a stimuli similar to the condition stimulus to elicit a similar condition response. So a dog conditioned to a specific bell tone might also salivate to slightly different bell tones. You get it? So always you're having a bell tone that maybe your dog is used to, but there'll be a time that any time that your dog will hear any tone associated with the already one that maybe the already tone that you have been presenting to it, it will start to what? React. You get it? That the stimulus generalization. The dog has generalized that every bird that it hears outside is going to what? Respond to it. Okay. But you have the stimulant discrimination, the learned ability to distinguish between the conditioned stimulus and other stimuli that do not signal an unconditioned stimulus. So there will be a time that the dog or the animal will learn to salivate to only a specific sound. Do you know at times that there's a sound of an owner for a dog? Maybe the owner will just make a sound. The dog will only react to those sounds. Apart from that sound, it won't react to any other sound apart from the one that comes from the mouth of its owner. Are we together? Good. So we call that what? Stimulus or discrimination. And we have the high order condition. That is, a new neutral stimulus is paired with an existing condition stimulus to create a new condition or stimulus. So you already have a condition stimulus. That is a neutral stimulus that has already been paired with an unconditioned what? Stimulus to elicit a condition response. You get it? And now that conditioned stimulus has also been paired with another neutral stimulus. You get it? So that conditioned response, that is maybe something that wasn't having the capacity to elicit a response, has now gained the capacity to elicit a response, has been paired with another neutral stimulus. You get it? That is all about the high order condition. Are we together? Great. And then remember that the key experiment in classical condition, the purpose. So the purpose, by according to Ivan, to study the digestive processes, the procedure, that's he used dogs and then the salivary gland to measure salivation and other things to know the results and its significance. You get it? So the significance that this classic experiment demonstrated that a physiological response, that is a salivation, could be conditioned to previously neutral stimulus, establishing the fundamental principles of what? Classical condition. Are we together? Good. And then we have Watson and Rayner's little Albert experiment. That's in the 1920. The purpose was to demonstrate emotional what? Responses could be classically conditioned in humans, and also yes, it was that was the purpose. And then the procedure, they used an 11-month-old infant, little Albert, was initially shown a white rabbit, a white rat, a rabbit, and a monkey, and other stimuli, one of which he feared. The researchers then began to present the white rabbit, that is a neutral stimulus, and immediately strike a steel bar with a hammer, unconditioned stimulus, behind Albert's head, producing a loud noise that startled and frightened him. Unconditioned response. So that little boy, they presented him a white rabbit. So that was a neutral response. Sorry, a neutral stimulus. The white rabbit was presented to that little kid. The little kid didn't do anything or react to anything. But the moment that they strike a bar, like a bar with a hammer at the back of that little kid to create a loud noise, instantly the boy started to get frightened, because in the kid's mind, he or she thinks that the noise is coming from that animal that has been placed in front of him or her. You get it? So the result, after these parents, Albert began to show fear, because anytime that he sees that rat or rabbit, the noise comes, so he developed a fear. Are we together? Good. So at times we learn to fear. There are some fears that we have developed. It's not because that it is normal. We have learned to fear, because always the moment you see this particular person, and then maybe your heart starts beating, it develops fear. Are we together? Great. And then the operant condition. So with the operant condition, it's all about the instrumental condition. That's the definition about the operant condition. Is a type of learning in which a behavior is strengthening if followed by a reinforcer or a diminished or diminish if followed by a punisher. So the reason why people are behaving the way they are behaving is because there's something that's always being given to them when they behave that way. So in case maybe you always answer a question in class and the lecturer gives you 100 CDs every day, won't you be answering question every day? Yes. That behavior has been strengthened by a reinforcer, and that reinforcer is the lecturer giving you 100 CDs every day. So it has reinforced you or strengthened you to do more. But your behavior can also be diminished in case you answer a question in a class and the lecturer tells you that what you are saying, it doesn't make sense. How you feel? It gives you no hope to go and answer question in any class, or maybe his class. You get it? So that's all about the Operant condition. It's not always something that strengthens the behavior. It can also diminish what, or maybe diminish a behavior, or maybe followed by a punishment. It can just diminish that behavior that you are doing. Are we together? Yes. So with some key concepts, we have the law of effects. Key concept in operant condition. We have behaviors followed by satisfying consequences are more likely to be repeated, while behaviors followed by unpleasant consequences are less likely to be what? Repeated. If you always do something and then the consequences that it counts is satisfying, you always do it. But if you always do something and that consequence that comes is very, very unpleasant, you stop doing it, or it becomes less likely for you to repeat it. Are we together? That's the law of your effect according to Edward Thorndike. You get it? So you only be doing things that will only satisfy you because the consequences is pleasant to you. But if the consequences is unpleasant to you, it's very likely, or it's less likely for you to repeat that behavior. Are we together? So we have the reinforcement. So reinforcement is any consequence that increases the likelihood of a behavior occurring again. So reinforcement, you have the positive reinforcement and you have a negative what? Reinforcement. So the positive reinforcement, adding a desirable stimulus to increase a behavior. So you are always giving a child candy for cleaning their room. It's a positive reinforcement to increase that behavior that the child is always doing. You have a negative reinforcement, removing an aversive stimulus to increase a behavior. Example, buckling seat belt to stop the annoying buzz, or maybe taking an aspirant to relieve a headache. So note that this is not a punishment, it removes something unpleasant. So for example, you have always been playing game when your mom tells you to go and maybe watch the utensils or do home chores. The moment your mom takes out the game, it has increased, or so it has removed like an aversive stimulus, like it has stopped you from, because she will only give you an option that if you are able to do this, I will give it to you. So the moment your mom takes that from you and then you start doing that behavior, hasn't increased that behavior, but initially your mom has taken something or maybe something from you of which it will stop you from doing that behavior. Are we together? Good. And then you have the punishment. So punishment, any consequences that decreases the likelihood of a behavior occurring again. So you have the positive punishment and the negative punishment. So adding aversive stimulus to decrease behavior. You get it? Always you are beating the child to stop misbehaving. So that misbehaving is a positive punishment, because if I'm punishing you to stop misbehaving, I'm just adding more aversive stimulus to decrease what you are doing. But the negative punishment is removing a desirable stimulus to decrease a behavior, taking away from misbehaving or revoking or driving privileges. You get, so you take something from them for them towards decreasing some behavior that they are doing. Because if you're always watching something and always causing this behavior, why don't I take it from you so that it will stop what you are always doing? Are we together? Good. And then now this will be our last thing I'm going to talk about. The primary reinforcers. We have the innately satisfying stimulus that's fulfill basic biological needs, that's food, water, and warmth. We have the condition reinforcers, stimuli that gain their reinforcing power through association with what? Primary reinforcers. That's money, praise, and good grace. You have to understand. You have the shaping, a procedure in which reinforcers guide behavior toward closer and closer approximation of the desired behavior. And you have the chaining, that's linking together a sequence of simple behaviors to form more complex one, where each step serves as a cue and also a reinforcer for the next. So this will bring us to the end of our lesson, and then we will continue some other time. Thank you very much, and this is grade 8 tutor. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also share this video to your friend. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.